right, welcome. It is noon on the dot, and so we are going to start our Washington Farm Bureau 2024 pre-session legislative webinar. I am Bridget Kuhn. I am currently the first Vice President of Washington Farm Bureau. I was elected in 2022 and was reelected at annual meeting in November in 2023 to represent you in this role as really a core function of this position is our governmental affairs or legislative affairs work. And so part of that role is chairing our legislative committee. That committee is made up of leaders from each of our county farm bureaus, representing county farm bureau interests on the state legislative committee. And then also working with our professional staff, our governmental affairs team that you see joining me here on the screen today. And really, like, the work of the government affairs team is year round. And so, that's a really important reminder to how Farm Bureau is designed. We are designed to be really on guard and on call and, advocating for agriculture interests in Washington all throughout the year. But it really is an important time as we ramp up and lead into a new legislative session to take a focus and take a dive into what that really looks like for agricultural issues. And so our format today will be, I'm going to very shortly here hand it off to our governmental affairs team led by Bree Elsie, our Director of Government Affairs. And the team is each going to, they all focus on specific issue areas. And so they're going to give you updates on potential legislation or legislation we know to expect during session. And then after their remarks wrap up, we will have the opportunity for Q&A. And the format for question and answers today, I'll direct you to the bottom of the screen, right in the middle, the Q&A box. If you click on that, that's where you can submit questions to the team via text, via typing them in. If you have any issues, also go ahead and type them into the Q&A box, and our staff will be available to help guide you through that process. If you have a question on your mind, there's no need to wait to type it in until we get to that section of the presentation. And so, yeah, don't worry about losing your thought. Go ahead and type it into the question and answer box, and then we'll come back around to those questions when we get to the question and answer period. And then after we're wrapped up with that, I'll come back on and provide some resources and updates and reminders on how best to stay engaged and be a part of the process of advocating for agriculture during session. So with that, I will hand it off to Bree.
Thank you, Vice President Kuhn. Bree Elsie, Director of Governmental Affairs. I also handle mostly labor, tax, and fiscal policy. Just want to talk a little bit about this legislative session before we jump into bills. Just for a reminder, we're going to enter into a short session, so it's 60 days long. That means it's going to be really fast and furious. So as we reach out to members about testimony, know that we don't always have a lot of time that we're given before a hearing date. And so sometimes the notice will be really short, but we really believe as a team that we are most effective when member voices are heard rather than just your lobbyist voices. And so we will be reaching out to all of you. And please, if you're interested in a bill or you see something on the news or you see something in our legislator, please contact us and tell us you're interested and that you would like to participate in that process so that we can loop you into the appropriate time to share your voice. You really are the experts in the industry. And so we really rely on you and your expertise to be successful as we go forward. So this will be the second half of the biennial 2-year cycle. And we typically get calendars for the next week's hearing on Wednesday night, sometimes on Thursdays. So that's typically where you will see us announce what the hearings for the next week will be and what will be more of an urgent matter for the coming week. We are doing this webinar rather early this year, so don't be surprised as team members go and describe their bills. We don't have all the bill numbers yet because technically legislative session hasn't started, so not all the representatives and senators have actually dropped their bills. However, we've heard of a lot of things that we know are coming down the pike that we want to share with you, but we have limited information in some instances and more detailed information. If a rep or a senator has already pre-filed their bill in December, we'll have a bill number for you, and we can actually point you directly to language. So I'm going to start out with, let's see, House Bill 1933. This will be right to repair. Now, Farm Bureau is supportive of right to repair, of farmers and ranchers having the ability to repair their equipment. Here's 1 minute. Let me close out so I don't get any more email notifications while I'm talking. And as such, farmers have negotiated through American Farm Bureau MOUs with John Deere Tractor, giving farmers the right to repair and the tools that they need to repair their equipment. This was something that was announced in January of last year, so January of 2023, and we're really excited about this. It's farmer-led, farmer-negotiated, resolving the problems that farmers have repairing their own equipment. Since that time, 90% of the industry has either signed an MOU or plans to sign an MOU to provide tools. That's Case New Holland and other manufacturers. So we were rather surprised when 1933 was dropped, and it's a right to repair bill. And it is sponsored by Representative Gregerson and Representative Kretz. Unfortunately, Farm Bureau will probably be testifying with concerns or opposed, not because we're opposed to right to repair, but because we believe we've actually already have an industry-led solution to the problem that currently exists. AFBF even has a portal on their website where members can write in any complaints that they have, where maybe one of the manufacturers isn't giving them the tools that they should have to repair their equipment. There's a portal for farmers to write in their complaints and get American help in resolving them. So unfortunately, the bill 1933 was not stakeholdered with agriculture. And that's a concern for us. When you drop a bill in support of agriculture, we would really hope that you would reach out to agriculture and stakeholder all the nuances, so that way we can all be on the same page before the legislative session started. And unfortunately, in this instance, that did not happen. So we will keep you updated as that bill moves, but currently we will probably be opposed or with concerns. Moving on to Climate Commitment Act, also known as Cap and Trade or Cap and Invest. Many of you have seen our emails go out as we move through the complications of this program. As you know, January 1, the program started and the exemptions for agriculture were not honored in that program as outlined in statute. And so we have been working with both parties and senators and representatives in trying to find solutions. And in particular, we worked pretty in a detailed fashion with Senator Mark Mullet. And as a result, he dropped a bill, which is Senate Bill 5783. There is a companion bill in the House. It's House Bill 1887 that is sponsored by Representative Chapman. And this is a large bill. It contains a lot of fixes that are necessary for the cap and trade program. But inside this bill are fixes for agriculture. And that would be a remittance program. So those who have not been able to get fee-free fuel can apply to this remittance program and hopefully get a refund, which they're owed because they should not have paid the fee on that fuel. And there's also a couple mechanisms for opening rulemaking to try to find additional pathways for the future where we resolve this issue going forward. And that can be a carbon trading mechanism. And it can also be just implementing a program where the certificate that agriculture is supposed to be using can actually be applied in all circumstances, whether that's directly from a fuel distributor or even at a retail location, which currently the retail location issue is not happening. So, and it also redefines agriculture to a more simple definition, one that is already in RCW provided by the legislature. And right now the definition for agriculture is quite complicated. And so this would simplify it back to the legislative definition for agriculture. Currently, the majority party is unwilling to schedule this bill for a hearing. That's been really unfortunate. We thought we would get some kind of momentum on a fixed bill, but there are other factors that are complicating this issue. So as many of you will know, there is going to be an initiative on the ballot to completely repeal the program. And any bill that contains language where you have to reopen the statute and make changes could be put on the ballot additionally alongside the repeal bill as an alternative. And attorneys and the majority party are trying to figure out if they want an alternative on the ballot and what they want that alternative to be if they pursue that route. So until we get answers to these questions, you're going to see the government holding back on any type of bills that might open the statute right now until they figure out what path they want to take for the November ballot. So a lot of it has to do with the politics around the initiative to repeal. And so as we get more information on that, of course, we will update members on what a pathway forward looks like. But there is a good bill out there, or two good bills out there, and we are supportive of them as they stand. We had a hand in helping to write them, and that was a really positive interaction with Senator Mullet and Representative Chapman. And we're really appreciative to them and the work that they did to try to help us resolve our issues. So additionally, there are going to be, of course, more labor bills this year. There always is a bunch. And I'm going to rattle off a few just really quickly. One is 1959, that's paid family medical leave over the last few years. This is a program that's been implemented mostly for large employers. There was an exemption for employers with less than 50 employees. This bill would bring in those small employers. So if you are one of those employers that's under the 50 employee threshold, you're really going to care about this bill because this will add costs to your business. So Senate Bill 5778, House Bill 1940, this is employer political speech. And this is an issue that has come up several times now over the last couple of years. And it is an attempt to limit what an employer can say to their employees. So what you're seeing on the flip side are bills that try to allow additional access to advocate groups, attorneys, third-party organizations. And then you also see bills that are trying to limit speech on the employer side. So this would include proposals to change legislation. So you might be prohibited from talking to your employees about overtime because that's legislation and that's a proposal to change legislation, right? So you could be prohibited from talking about overtime under this bill. You would also be prohibited from talking about labor organizations. So while they're allowing access to third-party organizations, the employer would be limited in what they could say about those different engagements. So that's a bill that's concerning for us, just a free speech bill and something we want to keep an eye on. We do not have a bill number for this one yet, but we do know that there's going to be a farm worker unionization bill. Senator Saldana has talked to us about it. We have not seen a draft. She told us it's coming. She told us she will not be the prime sponsor of this bill. So not only have we not seen language, but currently we do not know who the prime sponsor is going to be. But as soon as that's filed, we will get that over to our members to read and hopefully engage with us on that issue. And then lastly, there is a positive bill to talk about. And if you'll remember, a couple years ago, they passed the Long-Term Care Act. And as a result, employees had to pay a fee into a program to provide long-term care services when they hit a certain age and live within the state and basically retire in Washington state. On the onset of this program, we had advocated that H-2A workers not have to be in the program or opt out of the program because they're only here for a very limited amount of time. And by the time they would have to opt out and all that paperwork was filed, they'd basically be leaving and going back to their countries of origin. And after, of course, Employment Security Department did not listen to us on the onset, but now that they've had to do a year's worth of paperwork, they agree with us that has become quite cumbersome and it has been a burden on their agency to try to file all of that paperwork for all the opt-outs for the H-2A workers in a timely manner. And it's just not working for them. So they approached us, said we would like to run a bill to amend the original language and allow that H-2A workers are just left out of that program right on the onset. And we fully agree with them. That's something we've advocated in the past. We have not seen a bill drop yet for this particular agency request legislation. I have seen a draft of the bill. It's something I believe that we can support. If anything changes, of course, we'll notify members about that. But so far, we're just waiting to see who the sponsor is going to be and when they're actually going to drop the legislation. So with that, I will wrap it up, and I think I will pass it over to Mike.
Great. Thanks, Bree. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Innes. I'm new to the Farm Bureau Government Affairs team. I've been on board since about October. I was able to meet many of you at the annual meeting last month, so I appreciated all of that. But many of you I have not met, so hello. I handle a broad set of issues that include mostly things related to infrastructure, so transportation, water, energy, land use, those kind of items. As Bree mentioned, there are about 400 or so pre-filed bills that have been introduced, but there are many items that we still don't know what to expect for session, but there are some we do. I thought I'd start off by talking a little bit about transportation funding. This is going to be a big issue going into this session and probably spilling over into next session in 2025. As you know, we passed the Forward Washington statewide transport package about 2 years ago. It included funding for additional infrastructure in Washington, including fully funding the culvert obligation in the state. All of that is I think, good news. However, since then, the state has experienced, as we all have, inflation among most industries. Most of the capital projects that were funded have come in about 40% over budget. That's pretty significant. Most projects have contingencies attached to them, but not nearly in the amount of 40% or so. So the capital program is going to be severely over budget. The culvert program, the Seattle Times had a great article profiling this issue, found that the culverts are about $4 billion underfunded now because of inflation. $4 billion is significant. That's about double what the original amount was when it was fully funded 2 years ago. And then you have a preservation issue. The state has about $1 billion a year, or underfunds about $1 billion a year in preservation projects across the state. Preservation is very important to our members going forward, and we've want to see lots of preservation funding in packages. However, over the years, that funding has deteriorated over time. So you're looking at a pretty systemic funding issue within the transportation budget coming into this session. As Bree mentioned, it's a short session. This is where we're going to do the supplemental budget, not a full 2-year budget. So the likelihood of legislators fixing that longer term funding issue is pretty low. That's probably not going to happen. Not going to see any new revenue this year. The most I think we can expect is fund shifts to improve preservation funding. So taking money, moving monies around from unspent projects and putting them into the preservation program, I think is the most you can see. Going into 2025, however, that is going to be a completely different question. I think lawmakers may start to look at new revenue for transportation. It remains to be seen, but it's something that we'll have to watch really closely, especially considering the fact that we've had 2 statewide packages in the last 3, 4, 5 years now. The other topic I would focus on is the buffer issue, riparian buffers. We've seen a couple of buffer bills the last couple of years. Bree's worked on them quite closely. I think Rosella has as well. We did not expect to see a big buffer bill this year. As you know, we have the work group that continues to meet. Farm Bureau participates in that work group. In fact, we had a meeting on it this morning. So we don't expect to see a bill this year. The work group's report is supposed to be out later in 2024, and then I would expect we'd see some legislation in 2025 regarding their recommendations. However, the Department of Ecology did start working on a bill that they were calling a dredge and fill policy, or dredge and fill permit policy. We did not get wind of this bill until about a month ago. As Bree mentioned, the Department of Ecology did not stakeholder this effort either. And that's a problem, especially given the original buffer bill that was proposed a couple of years ago was not stakeholders as well, and created a firestorm among most of the ag groups in the state. This bill would have done the same thing as well. Dredge and fill, what the bill did, it was to create a permit program for landowners that would partake in any activity that constituted dredging or filling. Now, I would invite you to think about dredging and filling in a much more broader sense than how you're defining the words currently, or as a reasonable person would. Ecology likes to have a very loose interpretation of some of these words. Dredging could be as simple as walking into a buffer area or a wetland or any areas that could be considered a wetland and leaving a footprint. Ecology would call that dredging. Filling, on the other hand, could be as simple as taking a shovel of dirt and having some of that dirt fall off that shovel into a riparian area, a buffer, or any area that could be considered a wetland. Ecology would call that fill. And if you didn't get a permit for that activity, you would be considered in violation. Once we found out about the bill, we worked real closely with Ecology on how they were moving forward. We indicated to them that we were frustrated that they did not stakeholder the bill with ag groups, especially given the damage that was caused by the original riparian buffer bill a couple of years ago. Ecology, some good news on this front. Ecology considered all of that input and decided not to introduce the bill this session. I encouraged them to reach out to ag groups if they do plan to introduce it in a future session. And so I don't expect that we would see the dredge and fill bill this session. It remains to be seen whether we'll have any broader buffer bills this year. But we'll be watching that issue closely. Another issue that we're looking at is a solar bill. Well, we're not looking at it, but a community solar nonprofit group is looking at proposing a community solar bill this year. There's been a big emphasis on clean energy proposals this year, and solar has been one of the solutions that these groups have identified as wanting to pursue. We have guidance in our policy book on how we feel about solar programs. So we've been providing input to this group on this legislation. Basically, it's a grant program that landowners can choose to participate in. They would be allowed to apply for grant funding if a landowner wants to put solar projects or solar arrays on their properties within a certain scope defined in the bill, and then afterwards they would earn a credit with the utility that would lower their electricity bill or usage on the land. It's a completely voluntary program for the landowner. So we'll be watching that bill closely as it moves through session. If it moves through session, Representative Hackney and Senator Lovick are going to be the sponsors of that bill. I don't have a bill number yet. It has not been formally introduced. And then lastly, I'll just mention road usage charge. We've seen a road usage charge proposal the last couple of years. They have not gone anywhere. I expect we'll see another proposal this session as well. I don't think that bill is going to go anywhere this year either. I would expect the legislature to get more serious about a road usage charge probably beginning next year in 2025. But that's one that we'll be watching very closely as well. So why don't I stop there and turn it over to Caleb next.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Again, Caleb Werder, part of your governmental affairs team, covering issue areas such as general agriculture topics, environment, like wildfires or wildlife, and then some education policy related to our land grant universities and a few other things. And just a heads up, Mike and I do have a few crossover topics that more or less, depending on that issue, we will figure out in the office. And as that issue progresses, we'll be letting you all know who is covering that issue. If you have questions, of course, call the office or call one of us, and we will get you to the correct governmental affairs member who is working that bill or that issue. So doing the same thing, running through a few bills for you. Some of these bills we've seen drafts, but they do not have numbers, like Bree said earlier. And these are in no particular order coming from my issue areas. We have seen drafts on an agritourism bill, which has some high level changes to it. It does include allowing liquor licenses on agritourism sites or facilities, farms, etc. And this is something that our members, I've heard it multiple times, are requesting to be able to serve beer or wine during their festivals or ag tourism events. And there's also some language in there that includes a study for the state to conduct on how land use and farmland preservation intersects. So based on our policy and facilitating, promoting ag tourism in conjunction with ongoing farms, this is something at this time we will be supporting. And of course, we will work with counties and stakeholders, our members, to help craft language and create that testimony to this topic. And of course, that includes sticking to the statewide implications. I know there's a lot of contention in a lot of our counties on this subject. These high level changes happening at the state is what we will want to stick to on talking points. Next bill that I have for you all, there's a few related to wildlife. This is bill number 5939. In-house, we're calling it the wolf kill bill. A better term for that is livestock predation. And what this bill allows is fairly simple, is family members or employees of a confirmed livestock predation by wolves may sit on that livestock carcass and kill the first wolf that returns to that predation. And then once, if a wolf is taken on that livestock carcass, of course, it has to be turned over to Fish and Wildlife. But it does have bipartisan support at this time with Senator Vandeweghe and Senator Wagner in the Ag Committee. And we will be supporting this bill as well. The next bill is a program that some of you may be familiar with. It's the Deer and Elk Damage Program. This bill number is 5784. It also has bipartisan support. Depending on what you're farming or what side of the state you may lie on, there's plenty of our members who have had issues with elk coming into crops, eating said crops, damaging those crops. And there is a program through the state that you can apply for to receive some compensation for those damaged crops. What this bill does is increase those funds that are available. The general pool now is only $30,000, but this bill looks to increase that pool to $300,000, and then also increases the per farm claim from $10,000 to $30,000. While it's not perfect, and this doesn't necessarily treat the overall issue of a lot of the things we're running into with different elk herds across our state, this does help get our farmers some compensation back for those crops in the meantime. And of course, the statewide elk management idea is still out there. However, we do not believe at this time that it's going to come back during this session. And so this is a small bill that we can help our members out with in the meantime. And we will readdress these issues when that statewide elk management program or conversations start. We are also looking to hopefully apply some amendments to this elk and deer damage program. What that looks like, we're not sure yet, but the idea being some way to track the elk so that farmers understand or know when those elk are coming into their area, and they can apply deterrence more effectively and efficiently to prevent those crop damages. Next up is a bill that we had on our plates last session and has been intimate to the livestock and cattle industry. We have not seen a draft yet. It's mostly just been conversations on my end with a couple of ag groups and Representative Dent, but it looks like beef checkoff will be coming back this year. How that looks, we're not exactly sure because we have not seen that draft yet. But it sounds like it would be the same increase that was proposed last year, increasing the state assessment to $2.50. It sounds like it could be a tiered approach, so it won't happen all at once, but over several years, possibly a 50-cent increase each year. And then we will be working to make sure it includes the language to increase reporting and transparency to the legislature as our policy book states. As long as that language is in there, like it was last year, I believe it was an amendment submitted by Senator Judy Warnick. Once we see that language included on the bill, then we do plan on engaging on this bill with other livestock groups. We also have a draft version of a pesticides bill, which bans neonicotinoids. I believe that's how you pronounce that. I will be working on that pronunciation all session long. This has been drafted, but not yet pre-filed by Senator Leas, who is sitting on the Senate Ag Committee this year. It sounds like it is intended to only be 1 year, but plans do change. He is a Democrat from the Edmonds area, and pollinators are near and dear to his heart, which as ag producers, we all appreciate. Pollinators are very important to our industry. The intention of this bill is to ban these types of pesticides more or less from store shelves or from overusage by homeowners. The draft that we've seen more or less exempts agriculture commodities, applicators, etc. So on the surface, it looks like this is something that is intended to not affect agriculture. However, we do have a lot of questions. We're working with several other organizations to make sure that this is a tight bill that does not affect agriculture. We're also working with WSDA in these conversations to understand what full implications are. We're suspecting that landscapers will likely have issue with it, etc. But being in draft form, these conversations are really just beginning, and we will include more details to you once we have those through our legislator and other publications during session. And then the last bill that I have for you has been filed. It's House Bill 2051, and this was drafted by Representative Wallen, possibly, and it's related to the small engines ban. So anything under 25 horsepower, gasoline or diesel powered, would connect us to the same ban in California. So weed eaters, hedge trimmers, everything we use on our properties and our farms continually throughout the year would be banned, and that's related to no new small engines under 25 horsepower sold after 2027. So anything that's manufactured before 2027 would not apply. Generators and chainsaws are exempt. However, pumps would be banned and several other types of small engines you use on your farms. Overall, not a great bill, and we are finding ways to testify against that bill. So that's really all I have. Again, I think we'll be entering into the Q&A session shortly, but I will go ahead and pass it back to Vice President Kuhn.
Thank you, Caleb, and the whole team. I feel like you're reporting from the land of great ideas sometimes in big quotes. So we'll just jump right in to some of our questions that were submitted through the Q&A box. And then if you had trouble with that, or something comes up or a follow-up question, we have the ability to basically unmute your feed and ask a question. So what I would ask you to do in that case is on the bottom menu, the raise hand function would, if you click on that, it would indicate that you'd like to be called on to ask a question verbally. So let me go ahead and get started with the questions already submitted. But if you'd like to ask a question verbally instead of through the chat, go ahead and raise your hand when you're ready. So going back to the right to repair MOU issue and the bill that's been proposed, the question is, why would we oppose the right to repair bill when it does what our Farm Bureau policy wants? An MOU maybe isn't necessarily the permanent solution. Either party could walk away. Having a solution in law would likely be longer lasting. So I wanted to give Bree an opportunity to kind of talk about the strategy and the Farm Bureau position on that.
Thank you. That's a good question. So we would call this bill a solution in search of a problem. We feel like the industry has resolved this issue based on the policy that our farmers have created. Now, when you have the legislature intervene after the industry has already gathered or accomplished the goals that they want to see in an agreement, when the legislature intervenes, it's not always going to be what you want the solution to be. And so in this case, because agriculture was not stakeholdered, actually environmentalist groups and independent repair facilities were the stakeholder parties instead. And so the outcomes are going to be skewed towards their desires and not necessarily toward those of the farmers. And I think that's pretty critical. This bill was modeled after Colorado legislation that passed, and in there was private right of action, which increases litigation opportunities. This version of the bill does not have the PRA, but don't be surprised in the future if this bill passes, if they expand upon that concept and eventually do include something like a PRA, which would leave people, liable in a litigation sense. And then how are the MOUs strong? Well, that's kind of the beauty of the private sector. When farmers talk with each other, they say, hey, I can get a toolkit from John Deere. Can you get that from Case? Well, maybe you should be buying your tractor from John Deere then. Well, then Case says, oh, shoot, I want to be part of that. I don't want to lose business. I want to make sure that I'm offering the same services that John Deere is. So sure enough, Case went and created an MOU as well. And before you knew it, just in 1 year, 90% of the industry had transferred over to MOUs that offered farmers and ranchers the tools that they need to repair their equipment. And that's just the accountability you get in the private sector. Nobody wants to lose business because they're not being a team player in some instance. So when we look at industry solutions, versus legislative solutions, we're always going to default to the private sector and hope that industry resolves problems effectively by working together, rather than legislating an issue, and the outcome might be incredibly different and may not actually be all the things that we would want that deal to be. So right now we have the solution. It is working, it's growing, and we consider this a solution in search of a problem.
Thanks, Bree. And then shifting gears, there's a follow-up from really directed towards probably Caleb, but perhaps the rest of the team. There is an upcoming deadline of January 12th for testimony submissions to the Fish and Wildlife Commission Conservation Plan. Does the team have an update on our engagement on that?
I am tracking this. I'm trying to see if this was the same conservation plan that was introduced last spring or summer. I believe they also had a comment period then as well. Robin, I'll probably follow up with you on it to see what your specific concerns are, but absolutely, I'll take another look at it to make sure Farm Bureau has input.
Thanks, Caleb. So another question that was just a more technical question on the bill number for the agritourism bill, but I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Caleb, that does not have a bill number yet.
Correct. There is no bill number. It has not been filed. It's just a draft that we have seen come across our desks working with both legislators and some staff.
Awesome. And questions like these are a great segue into, as when we wrap up Q&A, we'll be going over all the tools that you can use to work with our team to get updates when bills are filed, and to make sure that we're staying on top of the specifics when they are available. Would anyone like to take a crack at the kind of an update on the Snake River Dam issue? This is more of a federal issue, but our team obviously engages as much as we can on this really important issue for Washington ag.
I can do that if Bree's agreeable to that. Is that okay? Okay. So many of you probably saw the agreement that the federal government made with a series of tribes. I think news broke on that. They were calling it a secret agreement. News broke on that around annual meeting time. That's a very concerning development to many of the stakeholders. Farm Bureau, we issued a statement on that. Rosella had some comments related to our concerns regarding that agreement. There was no stakeholdering done on that. It was done, as most of the press reported, in secret. So a lot of the agriculture groups and many business groups as well were very frustrated and concerned by those developments. We're continuing to monitor this closely. Congresswoman Kathy Morris Rogers is having a meeting tomorrow to provide an update on what's going on with that issue. I'm participating in that meeting, so hopefully we'll learn a little bit more as things progress.
Thank you, Mike. Let's see, there were some questions that were answered in the Q&A box. I don't know if staff took any of those on that might be important to the good of the order. Feel free to pop in. So just as a review, that small gas engine bill sponsored by Representative Waller. Does somebody have that pronunciation so we can all get it right the rest of the session?
It's Whalen, Representative Whalen, Amy Whalen.
Whalen, thank you. And that's House Bill 2051. If you want to take note on that and begin to follow it through the process. How about, there were a couple questions about ELK bills. I believe we covered most of it, but there was one still left in chat. House Bill 1849 on elk management. Caleb, do you have some follow-up on that?
Correct. That's the statewide elk management program I mentioned there at the end. That was introduced quite late, one of the last days of session last year before cutoff. There's quite a bit of testimony on it, and in the interim, Representative Lukanoff more or less passed that project off to Representative Dent. In conversations with Representative Dent, it sounds like it's not coming back this year, likely to have some sort of stakeholdering, roundtable, work group, etc., moving into summer of 24, so upcoming this next year, and then that program more or less will be readdressed in future sessions, likely for 25, but also have to see how those work group sessions go. So that's why this elk and deer damage program is more or less a stopgap in this current session, and depending on what comes from negotiations in the elk-wide management program, hopefully there isn't any changes, but all things will be considered as that is a much larger idea and package that will be proposed.
Thank you, Caleb. Yeah, and just following up, the ecology dredge and fill bill does not appear to be one that will be introduced this session, so there isn't a bill number attached to that. And then it looks like Larry had a question perhaps about the same comment opportunity as Robin did. The question is, has Farm Bureau given any feedback to the riparian buffer program that the Conservation Commission is writing?
And this might be a little bit different than the previous question. This probably specifically has to do with the riparian bill, the voluntary riparian bill that Farm Bureau and stakeholders were successful in getting passed via a budget proviso last year. And the guidelines were released, and Caleb did a review, and we also worked with other ag associations to see if their review matched our review. And there was a couple of things that we looked for specifically. One is, when the Conservation Commission drafted these guidelines, did they follow the intent of what we were hoping would be the final program based on the language, the very prescriptive language that was in the capital budget? And we did that on purpose because we wanted really prescriptive language on this program. So that's why it was put in the capital budget, because we could copy and paste language from the original policy bill and make sure it was very detailed as to what the wishes of the tribes and private landowners would be in a final program. So two things. One, was it bottom up or top down? Of course, we wanted it to be bottom up. We wanted it to be private landowners, local tribes, and conservation districts working together to prioritize those projects and make sure that they were all working together to also create criteria that best fit the region in which the projects were going to happen, which is very different from Eastern Washington to Western Washington, and a site potential tree height and things like that and watermarks are going to vary depending on what region you're in. We didn't want a top-down approach where it was ecology setting the standard, and that maybe there was like a 240-foot buffer on both sides mandated across the state. So that was in there. It was bottom up. So we made sure that they held true to the terms of the bill and that this would be a bottom-up program. 2 was, if you'll remember, in the very last days of session, there was a colloquy. And in that colloquy, the governor had changed 2 words in the bill. And we wanted ecology to have an advisory role only. That would be like technical assistance, but they actually wanted ecology to have decision-making authority. And so we asked Senator Vandeweghe and Senator Schessler, you need a Republican and a Democrat to stand up and ask each other a question and agree on a definition. And so we took their more mandated language about having regulatory authority and turned it into advisory only. And we really wanted to make sure that the guidelines said, sure enough, that it would be advisory only. And Caleb was actually the one to find this sentence. It says additional review of proposals may occur, including but not limited to consultation with tribes and partner agencies. So that's review. It's not decision making. And so these are the things that we looked for in particular to make sure that they were actually following the intent of the stakeholders who worked on this bill. And so we didn't find any problems with the way that the guidelines were drafted. And so we feel confident that this program can move forward without any comments that we would need on our part requesting changes, because we do feel like they follow the letter of the law and they did a good job drafting those guidelines.
Thank you, Bree. So we've kind of been able to rattle through most of the questions that we've seen here. It looks like we have a couple. Thanks, Larry, and thanks for the question. So yeah, there's some more conversation about bill numbers, but I think it's actually a really great segue. And Tara Lucky, who is our state membership chair for Washington Farm Bureau, is also on this call. I see a lot of our committee chairs and leaders from across our state organization and our counties here. So I really appreciate you being here. But Tara's question actually segues us really well into the wrap up of our time today. Tara says that she really appreciates this overview. It's very helpful and informative. When will this recording be available to share with those who couldn't make the live session? What resources do you suggest sharing with fellow Farm Bureau members to keep them informed and engaged? So we actually have answers to that question. If we wanted to move in, I believe Ben Tyndall, who is also on our government affairs staff, is here behind the scenes making sure that we're running. And so if Ben is available to pop up a few slides, we can run through some of those resources that we think really will position our members to be active during session and follow on to this kind of pre-session work. Okay, so really that starts with a review of some of our communications tools. And again, thanks for Ben Tyndall, who's not been introduced here. He is the communications lead for our government affairs team and has been doing an excellent job of coming up with effective communication tools to give our members the information they need and how in ways that we prefer to receive it. So we have a few different platforms that we work through via email. We have Legislator, which most of you on this call would be familiar with as a weekly opportunity to stay up to date and most current on issues that are moving through the session. We have In the Loop, which is more of a on-demand opportunity for us to not just talk about issues that are moving in a given week or short term, but also those longer lead items, again, the regulatory processes, the open comment periods. That's where we're able to put in new labor rules from L&I, all the different ways that our government interacts with agriculture and our issues. We try to incorporate into In the Loop. Action alerts. Action alerts are really key because we drill into one specific bill or one specific issue with specific actions that our members can take, sign up to testify, or state your position for a legislative hearing on a bill, or submit public comments during those opportunities in the regulatory session. Action alerts are definitely, right there in red, making it very clear. When we combine what our team does by taking Farm Bureau grassroots-led policy, putting it into a strategy during the legislative session, and then our action alerts are what re-engage and close that loop and make sure, because as Bree mentioned, as we got started, really are most effective when folks like you that are impacted and living with these issues day in and day out, you have the expertise and you're feeling these things. Really, you're who our elected officials and our regulators need to hear from. And so action alerts give you the guidance on how to do that best. And then field notes are another way to stay connected with Washington Farm Bureau activity and opportunities to engage. So when we have, select opportunities to, whether it's coming to Olympia or engaging with elected officials in other ways, field notes is really that, kind of deeper dive into Washington Farm Bureau as an organization and ways to we appreciate everyone's time and energy. It's all volunteer, and we appreciate everyone's willingness to do that. Field notes keeps you connected to the organization that you contribute to. If you look down in the right-hand corner, there is a QR code. If you're joining us on like a desktop or a laptop and not on your phone, you could actually use the QR code and scan that with your camera phone to make sure that your correct email address is on file with us to be receiving these publications. And then text alerts. So what we acknowledge about our lifestyle and I come from a cow, calf, and hay operation, and we're usually on the go a lot. We're not always necessarily sitting there in front of our email inbox. And so we've integrated text alerts into our communication, acknowledging that a lot of work can get done on these little devices. When we have service, I'm usually doing this when I'm out and about, but that's where it really doesn't, being active and answering an action alert or, scrolling through a quick message during session via legislator doesn't have to be, you don't have to be sitting at your desk to do that. And so we're trying to deliver these key communication and key activation points through different means that actually work with your lifestyle as an ag operator. And so again, you have the QR code. If you scan that, you'll be able to put in your current and correct information to also receive text alerts, as that can be a great alternative to having to actually go into your email and check your inbox. And as you'll see here, this is a recap of our 2024 legislative priorities. Again, that's a set of core issues that the legislative committee, as our grassroots representatives from our county farm bureaus, approved at the end of 2023 to, we basically put this on a card. On the other side of the card, we put some information reminding legislators and staff really like Washington is a leader in producing many commodities. And we provide some really, really great stats and reminders on how significant Washington agriculture is in our state. And so this is a piece that we get requests for this from time to time. And so never hesitate to reach out to the team if you feel like you have an opportunity to get Washington Farm Bureau's legislative priorities into good hands and kind of into the hands of people who need to be reminded. We can provide that, and we also will be able to provide electronic versions of this card as well if you guys find that useful. And then finally, as I said, And what I really, really love this opportunity to connect members with the staff that are working on behalf all year long, all day long. Thank you in advance for your efforts as we go into session. We know it's as intense as any harvest season that we tend to be familiar with. And so if you hadn't noticed, these guys are working, staying on top of a multitude of issues that impact us. They have the passion. In some cases, Caleb, we have a crew that feels deeply connected or is deeply connected to agriculture, and we know that matters. And so the other piece of this is they're incredibly available to our members. And so this slide here reminds you of everyone's general issue areas and our contact information, and you're encouraged to use it as we move through session. Another item that I did not mention on the front end, but I wanted to call attention to, we're always looking for ways to structure our efforts more effectively and also keep our members engaged throughout session. Again, those communication tools are great. What we've also instituted is a few key issue area committees under our legislative committee. And so if you're not one of them that's on this webinar, do know that from the grassroots level, we have activated 3 issue area committees that will be meeting every other week during session for virtual meetings with staff to make sure that we are diving into these bills as they move through and really bringing our grassroots leaders into the process kind of in a more hands-on way than just receiving emails, written communication, email, and taking those actions. Where we've added a layer of grassroots leadership engagement that I know I am really excited about seeing what we can do. I believe that it will make an impact and get our members, farmers and ranchers, in front of legislators in more ways and more impactful ways. So those are the updates I have. I believe we've cleaned up most of the Q&A. Does the team have any other updates they can share before we go?
I did want to mention the reintroduction of 1849. I don't believe that's reintroduced. What happens in a 2-year cycle is that bills don't actually die the first year. They're reintroduced for the second year. So they don't go away. They're retained in their present status. And so what I think you're seeing is actually last year's bill that still has another year of life on it. And whether or not they decide to move it is still up to them. It's still a live and active bill. I believe Caleb has intel from the House that they're probably going to take a cooling off period from that issue for maybe a year, but you will see that it is technically still active for another year.
Yeah, I'm also looking into that. Might be 5892, which is the diseased elk bill that Wagner recently introduced. So I'll look into both those things and follow up with the Skagit County members up there to see which details we're kind of missing each other on.
Yeah, thank you guys. Any follow-ups you guys have about these bills or others that you're catching wind of? We want you to continue to reach out and have communication with the team. Okay, and then we have another one. Janice is asking if we have plans for counties coming down for Ledge Days. Bree, do you want to give us like an overview of kind of some of the more broad activations that we have planned for this session?
Yes, we have a plan to kind of expand and grow every year. Last year, I believe we had the legislative committee, maybe it was county presidents attend the legislative reception, and it was very successful. This year, we've expanded it to a couple more committees, officers, I believe, state board members, and I think women's committee is going to be involved, maybe with some bags this year. The problem right now that we have is because these events have been so successful that we actually need a bigger venue. So next year, we're hoping to expand again and include more members into the activities. And so you will continue to see this program grow, and we will be on the hunt for a new venue that actually can have the capacity to grow in the ways that we would like to for the future. So stay tuned. I think you're going to see more and more inclusivity as we move forward.
Yep, that's a great reminder. It wasn't too long ago that our capital was not available to us in person. And so I really like how the team has worked and ramped up, session after session. And, as we widen, we should have more opportunities as we go forward for broad membership engagement in Olympia activation. All right, well, with that, we have used up an hour of your precious time. I hope it was valuable. And again, it's really just the start of our session efforts to interact between the government affairs team and members. So please be sure that you made note of everyone's contact information and follow up as needed and wanted. And again, thank you for being here, and thank you for all you do all year round for Farm Bureau and Washington Agriculture. Have a great day.